I feel that doctor's waiting room hush, so people are waiting for speeches. I know that moment. So
are we supposed to give speeches?
We're saying a few words, I think. Yes, I mean, did Trevor share this with you? No. So you've got time to prepare while I speak, and then you just give me the thumbs up and I'll stop speaking.
Okay, no, I've got my hour. I can speak.
Right. Feels like I should say something. Hello everybody, we're really pleased to see you this evening. We're delighted to welcome you. I'm going to start by just thanking Emily from Young Norfolk Arts. We haven't missed a letter, haven't we?
No.
I've done it, Young Norfolk, who's helped to organise this event this evening. And we're really pleased that John Pomeroy is with us. I'll explain why in a moment. So this splendid mural, which starts at 66 million years ago and comes up to the present and the immediate future, is the result of a very generous offer by Global Water Futures. And I know that Gennadiy had been very closely involved in looking as an artist, as sort of an artist in residence, as it were, at climate change in Canada, and he'll say more about that in due course. But this mural owes its existence to Global Water's future on the basis of the offer made by John Pomeroy, who will be talking in a moment after me, to say, did we want a piece of civic art? And that was a request that came to me as then leader of the council. I think this was in 2018, isn't it?
It did, yeah.
2018, so this is something which has been in gestation and fruition for the last 5 years. I immediately said yes, and for reasons known only to myself, I decided not to tell anybody else that I would agree to this, except the then Deputy Chief Executive, Nicky Rotsas. And we thought, well, just keep it as one under our... and so we will track this through. And of course, through COVID, a difficult time, discussions with colleagues from the Climate Research Unit, with Gennadiy as the artist, with the suggestions that were, fed into, for Gennadiy to reflect upon. We came to the conclusion in the end that, it was going to be left to Gennadiy to get on with it. There was a point at which you have to say to the creative person, okay, we're giving you our ideas, now, let those creative juices flow. And
we still try to advise them, but Gennadiy got to the point where he said, I'm not dealing with these people anymore.
and that's the artist's right and veto. And so, this piece of work, I finally did tell my colleagues, 3 months before we did the installation. We came down to Anglia Square and saw it, in its close to final form, and fortunately people were very comfortable with it. The political context for this is that climate change is the critical issue of our time. And I've been a firm believer, and I think it's a view, as they say, universally held, that sounds something like Jane Austen, really, doesn't it? That people recognise that that's the issue that faces us, and that art influences the way people think, the way they see the world. You know, if you take somebody like Turner, I mean, Turner painted the Industrial Revolution and said to people, you are living in the industrial age. In the same way, we are living in an age of dramatic climate change. And so the one thing I will say about these murals, and there are 6 supplementary murals which are outside, which are a kind of magnification of kind of key points in our climate change history, is that the last mural is a reminder to the people who sit in this chamber, the decision makers, about the decisions that they make, which can either take us back to actually roughly 66 million years ago in terms of very high, unlivable temperatures, or can mitigate and help us find a pathway through to enable us to survive as a species and all the other species on the earth, and a livable and sustainable planet. So it has that political purpose, art as politics, as opportunities to reshape people's thinking and come to positive outcomes. And we are extraordinarily grateful to Gennadiy as the artist, the research unit. You'll see the temperature bands across the top of the murals, which are, you know, based on that very high degree of accuracy of temperature change, and the creative interpretation of Gennadiy as well, and the fact that this piece of work is funded by Canadian colleagues and John's central role in making this possible. So I'm going to pass it over to John.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I've come a long way to be here, and I'm finally able to see this in person, which is a great delight. There have been wonderful discussions over the years as to what this mural, what these panels could be, and what they could convey. My name is John Pomeroy. I'm a professor at the University of Saskatchewan, which is in Western Canada, in a city called Saskatoon, which is almost as big as Norwich, and not quite as beautiful, I think. But anyway, I do have a connection to Norwich, and it's a great pleasure to be back, because I was a NATO science fellow here in the 1980s, working with Professor Davies under his supervision at the School of Environmental Sciences and Climate Research in the UEA. And so that's how I got my start going. So it's nice to have a bit of payback to the city and community that helped get me going. Anyway, so what's Global Water Futures? It's a science research program funded by the Government of Canada that was the largest Canadian government grant to water and climate research in Canada's history. And how large was it? Well, it involved 23 universities across the country, 213 what we would call professors, but some of them were lecturers and others at these, and about 2,000 students and researchers and engineers and others working on this program to adapt, to work out how we're going to successfully adapt to the challenges posed by climate change on water. And one of the Canadian co-founders of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, said if climate change is a shark, the water are its teeth. And so certainly we're seeing this in Canada right now with extreme events, floods and wildfires. This year alone, burning 18 million hectares. What's that, about 13, 14 million acres? But these are inconceivable crossing the country. Rapid glacier melt in the high mountains, which you see here, because when our glaciers melt, and this year in the Canadian Rockies, they melted downwards 9 meters. So imagine a 9-meter column of ice, gone. Where does it go? Well, it ends up in the ocean. And where do we see it? Here, on the coast of Norfolk. And so the more these glaciers melt, the more the sea level rises. And the other ice field that is melting very quickly is the St. Elias ice field. It's the third largest in the world after Greenland, but it's already melting very fast. So anyway, so we have this, there's a tremendous contribution to sea level rise from the many thousands of glaciers that Canada has, but also this global connection, because when you have a year in Canada with less snow cover on the ground, then the weather is different in Britain. The greenhouse gas emissions, Canada is the second largest country by landmass on the planet. And so whether greenhouse gases are taken up by vegetation, such as forests or wetlands, or emitted by oil and gas or agricultural practices, affects everyone on the planet. So it's a very much a global issue. Right now, the High Commissioner of Canada to the United Kingdom is Ralph Goodale, who is also from Saskatchewan, and he was instrumental in ensuring that Global Water Futures was funded. So he sends his regards as well to this. Anyway, so further back, how did the ARC start? It started as a collaboration. I've been fortunate enough to collaborate with the University of East Anglia, particularly Professor Davies, for many decades on various projects in Canada and elsewhere. And as we got Global Water Futures going, we realized that the scientists would come out and say, oh, here's a graph, all right, public, please take a look at this graph, what do you think of it? Or better yet, here's a table of numbers. It looks dire, I think it's really awful, it's going to kill us all. What do you think of that? And this is incomprehensible and unsatisfactory way to communicate information. And so we started talking to Trevor an artist in Norwich, Gennadiy Ivanov, who was interested to paint climate change. And so I said, I've got places he could paint. The melting glaciers, thawing permafrost, burning forests, drought-ridden prairie farmlands, drying lakes, floods, you name it, it's all there. So we had a series of expeditions so you could see the science in action, and Gennadiy painted this, producing hundreds of paintings. But it wasn't just art, look at this scene painted. It was based on hours and hours of discussion with Professor Davies and myself about the science behind the art. So it's science-informed art with very deliberate messages and very specific messages that hopefully are coherent in a way. And we're hoping that this is a way to convey scientific information that is complex, it has uncertainties, it's not something that the public will get into much themselves unless they really have had some science training. But you can look at a piece of good art and get it immediately, what's happening, which is a fundamental change in our planet, our way of life, and even our ability to live in the future. And so that's something that Gennadiy perfected on the paintings in Canada, which are hundreds that have been on display there and here, and then took those techniques to produce this incredible history of Norfolk and Norwich, from deep prehistory up into recent times, and then conveying that uncertainty and the choices that can still be made to change the future and to choose the future that we have. And that's the thing, is our common future is in our hands. It's not out of control. It's not just physics and chemistry, it's humanity. And it's what we choose to do. But first we have to envision what will happen and what those choices mean. And that's what this art allows and permits. So anyway, happy to be here and just delighted to see you all. Thank you.
I'm Trevor Davies. I'm going to attempt to give you a whistle-stop tour of the story of the mural. And as John has emphasised, this has been a very, very close collaboration between scientists and artists. Got to the point though when Gennadiy did say, as Alan intimated, I'm going to do this on myself. I think that point was when I offered to paint one of the scenes in the mural. That is true, isn't it? Yeah. So, the mural is in 6 parts. You can see close to, you can actually see breaks in the canvases. The first one covers the period from 66 million years ago through to 3 million years ago. The second one from 3 million years ago to 500 AD, and that is the time when Norwich first became established. Then from 500 AD to 1450, on the other side of the doorway, the fourth panel, 1450 to 1850. The fifth panel, 1850 to the present day. And then the last panel on the right-hand side, from the present day, 200 years into the future. So a lot of information is obviously telescoped into the panels on the left-hand side, because they cover such a long time period. And to give you an idea of the variation in the time periods, if you imagine that the mural is the length of the Norfolk coastline, and Gennadiy is used as a background to the story of the impacts of climate change on Norfolk and Norwich, as he's used the Norfolk coastline as this background. So the first panel, 66 million years ago to 3 million years ago, would represent the whole of the Norfolk coastline, except for the bit between Cromer and Sheringham. And that would be the second panel. So 3 million years ago to 500 years AD, that would be the distance between Cromer and Sheringham. If we move to the right-hand side, the last couple of panels would be the width of a laptop. So big change in the time scale. And within the mural, against the background of the Norfolk coastline and the sky, is a very, very rich story. And I'll just try to pick out a few parts of that rich story. And one of the beauties of the mural, I think, is that every time people look at it, they see something new. So the skyline, you can see, goes from deep red to dark blue. And there's an awful lot of climate information in that. Broadly, deep red, very hot, deep blue, very cold. And that skyline is based on work undertaken by the climatic research unit, in particular Michael Taylor and Tim Osborne, who will be talking in rather more detail about this in a little while. But there's an enormous amount of original research there in collating data sets, bringing them together, linking them up, and visualizing them. So, the story. Well, the story goes back 66 million years ago, and before that, a lot of the base rock in Norwich was laid down, the chalk. And this, the chalk, the underlying chalk, still influences the landscape of Norwich and Norfolk today. And that was the consequence of that particular climate during that period. So we move to 66 million years. No rocks at the surface as old as that in Norfolk. But that was the time of the demise of the dinosaurs. So that was a good point to start. In many respects, the most successful species, a group of species over a long time, they were wiped out by a major climate impact, which was caused by a comet. And there's a comet in the top left. There's also a face in the cliffs that some of you will be able to see. It'll be hidden behind a pillar for some. That was the appearance of the first hominid. So that was going back to well before 3 million years ago. We then move into 3 million years to 500, up to the origins of Norwich, and that was a period of very pronounced climate variations, the ice ages. You can see that there's lots of blue there, but there are also some milder periods in between the individual ice ages. So Gennadiy is represented in one simple artistic device a lot of the science which explains those variations. And broadly, they were variations in the Earth's orbit around the Sun, but also changes in the atmospheric composition of the atmospheric composition, including in particular carbon dioxide. So Gennadiy has represented the Sun, the Earth, on either side of the Sun, and the arrows indicate the types of variations in the orbit, and he's represented the Sun and the Earth orbiting around it as a carbon dioxide molecule. So that is the structure of a carbon dioxide molecule. So one here looks like a very, very simple artistic device, but it's very, very clever because there's a lot of information. What we found is that having a discussion with somebody here tonight, he's just noticed that. What is it? So we can explain it as scientists. So because there was an enormous variation in temperature, and at some point there was a great deal of ice around the world, at other points there was little or no ice, so sea levels varied by something like 150, 170 meters. So what has Gennadiy done? If you can see in the sea, there is Neptune. And Neptune is holding a trident in one hand, pointing upwards, and a trident in the other hand, pointing downwards. An artistic device which gives a cue to what's going on in terms of the variations in sea level. We then move on to the point where Norwich existed, and there is Norwich existing, starting to exist. Just before Norwich was established, there's a henge on the skyline. That is the Arming Hall wood henge, which was a very significant feature, which is now invisible because it was made of wood. But many archaeologists believe that it was as significant as Stonehenge at that time. There's also Woodhenge. There are footprints at Haysborough Beach, which are the oldest hominid footprints found in Europe from several hundreds of thousands of years ago. So we see the development of Norwich, the growth of Norwich, Vikings coming in around 850 during a period of pink, if you look at the sky. So, quite equable, warmish, quite stable weather, which allowed civil communities to grow and to develop. And towards the end of that third panel, as we get up to the 1450s, the climate started to deteriorate, and you see blues coming in and continuing in the skyline up to the fourth panel on the other side of the door. And that produced a large impact on societies, on communities, even though those climate variations were minor compared to the variations during prehistory. So although it was a relatively stable period of climate compared to the whole time period of the mural, those variations had major impacts on societies around the world, and including Norfolk. And one artistic device which some of you will notice, because it's quite noticeable, is Frankenstein towards the end of that panel. Frankenstein is there because in 1815 there was a massive volcanic eruption in Indonesia. The material spread around the whole atmosphere, and it produced what became known as the year with no summer in 1816. And during that year, Mary Shelley was holidaying in Switzerland with Lord Byron, and Byron suggested that she wrote a novel, a book, a story, because they couldn't go out walking, which they'd planned because the weather was so severe. So she wrote Frankenstein, which sort of fitted the mood of the climate at the time. We then move into the penultimate panel, where the Little Ice Age variations still continued, and this is the period, but you can also see that that is the period where chimneys started appearing. This is the Industrial Revolution. Oil industries, fossil fuel excavation, large increases of carbon dioxide starting. Can't see the panel myself now. And then we move on to the present day. Present day through to the future. And I'll leave Tim and Michael to explain the skyline at that point. But there's a story there, you can see a blonde bob of hair, which might be Johnson, but in fact it's Trump. And that's climate deniers. This climate deniers started to play an important role. Climatic Research Unit is also features there, because the Climatic Research Unit was established in Norwich 50 years ago and has produced an immense body of work about climate change. 2 life belts, one coloured green with a little bit of white at the top and the bottom, representing ice, and sort of warmish brown. The other, no white, no ice, no green, but reds and oranges. So which life belt do we want to choose? The one which is leading us to a possibly manageable future, and the other one which is leading us into an unmanageable future. Now the story is very rich, and it's impossible even for Gennadiy to paint the rich story of the impacts of climate on Norfolk and Norwich. So for each panel he has produced what he calls an element painting, which develops the climate story in more detail. And they are exhibited in the corridor around the corner. And I'll leave him to say a little bit about why the elements painting for the present 2000 and 2200 is black at the moment. Tim and Michael, do you want to say rather more about the climate in terms of the warming strikes?
Well, actually, it would be to know I'm going to say less than you said. Is that okay? Because you've covered so much already. Which is great. So I was going to say some of that, and you said it for me, so perfect. So I'm Tim Osborne from the Climatic Research Unit here at University of East Anglia. And yeah, Trevor's given you a really good overview there. As mentioned at the end, the elements paintings down the corridor, please do look at those too and ask us about the details in them, because there's a lot of stuff in there that about how society and climate have interacted, really important stuff, but you might need some guidance from us as to what each element is, but definitely look at those. I would say that the other thing I want to point out, I suppose, is that the Climatic Research Unit is depicted there, which is nice, not just because we wanted a cameo in the painting, but because the reason, as John says, we have agency in this, in terms of choosing our future, is because we understand climate change, what causes it, what the implications are, and what we need to do to address the climate crisis. And we have these, in the final skyline, there's a deep red colour and there's a paler red colour below it, which is the more benign future, and it's sort of been illuminated by the Climatic Research Unit building as a lighthouse, which I think was Genadi's intention there. So that's very nice to see, because climate science, including that done here in Norwich for the last 50 years, but also around the world nowadays, that's really why we have agency in the climate crisis, because we can understand the consequences of our actions. I think I won't say anything more, about that. Michael, did you want to add anything about the stripes in the sky, or how complicated it was to do that? Or
Yeah. So the skyline, the reds, whites, and blues in the skyline are directly calculated from data. So we took the what we call the instrumental record, which is the global temperature measurements for all the weather stations around the planet. So that's the fifth panel, just after Frankenstein. So that was we've got monthly measurements from 1850 until the present, from over 10,000 weather stations around the world. And that data was used to generate the stripes that you see throughout the whole mural. And those stripes were first developed by Professor Ed Hawkins in the University of Reading, and they're fairly ubiquitous now, I would say. They're being used all over the planet, which is great. And there's even a day of the year, which is the 21st of June, which is called Show Your Stripes Day, where we encourage people to sort of come out of their shells and be bold to convey the message that we need concerted action on reducing emissions. And using stripes as a vehicle to do that. So, for example, people paint stripes on road crossings in Germany. We've got them on our mural here. Where the presenters use them to show the history of measurements at a location. Some people make ties out of them. They're a very good visual vehicle for showing how the climate is changing. And the way they're calculated is we have a blue through white to red colour palette, and the white is centred on a reference period of temperatures, which from the World Meteorological Organization is the average temperature in the period 1961 to 1990, so around 1975. If you take the global average of 1975, anything warmer than that would be red, anything cooler than that would be blue. Very deep blues would be a lot cooler, and very deep reds would be a lot warmer. So for example, at the Paleocene, Eocene thermal maximum, the really dark red bit just after the asteroid impact, the global temperatures were 14 degrees warmer than now. And there were no trees in Antarctica. There was no ice in Antarctica, and it had pine trees. And during the ice ages, temperatures could get down to 6 to 7 degrees colder on average as a planet than they are now. And people may think that 1 degree or 1.28 degrees warmer than pre-industrial period is not a lot, because they think, oh, it's mid-October and 1 degree extra doesn't really impact my life. But this 1 degree is a temperature average over the whole planet. So a 1 degree rise over the whole planet is responsible for the wildfires we're seeing in areas like Canada, John Pomeroy is from, wildfires in Australia, floods in Pakistan, and dreadful heat waves, marine heat waves which are decimating fish populations in the North Atlantic. So this is with a small change of 1 degree and above. And during the, let's say, benign climate during the Middle Ages, we developed our civilization. People developed agriculture, and that was with small fluctuations of a couple of tenths of a degree. So we're talking of a future which is dire. I can't emphasize that a future of 1.5 to 2 degrees averaged over the planet will lead to dire climate consequences, maybe not for us directly in Norwich, but for someone, somewhere on the planet. And that's where we have to remember our humanity, because our role in that is not only historical, it's also contemporary. What we do now impacts people now around the world, and we have a responsibility. I don't want to say too much technical stuff, but yeah, I'll stop there.
Thanks, Michael.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a story I was telling you about my process of work. So I came to Norwich, Norfolk about 20 years ago. The first time I visited Haysborough, and I was impressed by amazing solid protection from the sea. They build new stuff from wood and metal and concrete. So I haven't been there for 15 years, and I just started appearing in newspapers and radios and televisions and news like houses collapse in Haysborough. Just been, what's going on? And I started I started to do some projects about life and people, and so I've been interested in what's going on. And I visited Haysborough again. I can see on the beach very sad looking bricks from the houses what left. And all beautiful concrete fences were destroyed. This for me it was like shocking. And I started to ask myself, what's going on? And start to dig this information more and more and more. And start to paint it. And this is really brought me to, so I showed my stuff to Trevor Davis. And he was impressed as well, and started to explain me what's going on in scientific side. And he said, well, he introduced me with John Pomeroy, and we started to work together. So I was so excited of this, and I kind of, in a sad way, so I just started to think I need to do something solid and real, and not just fancy commercial little things. I just need to do something what people can really read and think about future. The past, actually history, past and present and future. So for me it was very interesting to work with scientists because art science is relatively new kind of combination for working. It's very hard to work with scientists, for artists, because artists is quite fairly flying people, and sometimes they do whatever they like. They don't control themselves and not responding for many things. But to work with scientists was a big discipline. You must understand deeply the content, context. So you're chatting with them, listening, but you can deliver your own vision, but different way. But you must to follow the structure and the facts, data. You can't do anything, something like false information. So I really enjoy it, yeah, because I find it's very important. Yeah. I'm from family of army. My father was in the army, so I was always quite disciplined, and I really like this things. When you're growing, you got your own life. Sometimes you're losing this opportunity to look after yourself and be disciplined. You just do whatever you like. But this is we started work like a team, and everything is coming, lots of information to digest it, to work on it, to go inside. It was very hard for me first time, but later I just found it's very helpful. It works very well, and it takes me to paint this 4 years. Well, I started 2018. 4 years. But first year was so hard because I just simply, I got tons of information I couldn't understand where I can start. So I've got so many sketches with different. I've been looking tons of artists and muralists from around the world, just trying to find my way, but it's nothing works really. So one day I come back to paper and just stood up and to the sea. I've been drawing, painting, and I just said, "Oh, this is my canvas, the beach, the cold, the cliffs." And also we visited Constantine as well. It's an incredible canvas where you can put objects and detail, add more details, and to add the facts, include lots of elements. And it's also, in the beginning I just painted the stripes. So it was actually Alan's kind of first idea. But we've always been discussing about turn. So I've always been thinking about more impressionistic things. It's Alan's actually first idea. It's why it's how he pushed to do this us. And so I decided to do this, to use it as because it's Norfolk, it will be in Norwich, it will be about us for the future generation. Almost history, all history. It's all proved and all clear that data is about climate change and the planet and the region. So it's all really solid, informative mural. It's not just something about something. So it's all about us and about future. So it's my history. So does anybody have some questions? Scientists? Yeah.
From a consumer viewpoint, should we say, and City Council as well, we have a tremendous story here that really and truly should be shared. And I'm thinking former sheriff from the Gerald family, who are also publishers. And I'm wondering whether or not this should be published more widely somehow with this. I wish I'd recorded everything that had been said this evening, because there's a tremendous story here. Yeah. And it seems to me that I'm thinking, you know, Channel 4 do documentaries and things. There's a tremendous story that needs to be told and shared more widely. And I think it has a far more greater impact, for example, than some of the stuff we see being preached at us from certain quarters. This tells a story. It doesn't preach. It means people can draw their own conclusions and think about their own futures. And so, yeah, so I'm thinking there's something that can come from this further. That's just me, anyway.
Well, we tried many times to contact with BBC local. Well, we actually have published. It's published in EDP in the big. Well, when Unveil is mural. But we tried contact with TV and radio, but
that's really encouraging.
It's very good.
There is more information on the Climatic Research website, where the story is elaborated. This artistic story is elaborated on through the elements paintings, and then elaborated on in words. So, for example, you may spot a witch, you may spot a turnip, you may spot a cat, and they are all important elements of the impact of climate change. on Norfolk. Those are elaborated artistically in the elements paintings, but if you do want more information at this stage, it is available on, is the Climatic Research Unit website link on that?
Yep.
Gennadiy, you did mention the blank canvas.
Oh yeah, well, I just forgotten. We left, yeah, it was in the corridor, elements painting, but we left one canvas as empty. So we just thinking sometimes other artists in the future, they can paint what's happened in the city, was drowned or dropped.
Every time I pass that, I think of that. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. And the Gerald's actually is a good point to speak to them because we, I think it would be very interesting, important to ask them when publications.
I mean, just to elaborate on that, what the show says there is a detailed story on the Climate Research Unit website about some of the details there. But you're right, the kind of audience that you're trying to perhaps reach there is not somebody who's going to come and read a 20-page text document on our website. So although it's there, it would be nice to tell the story in ways that engage different audiences. But again, I don't know, as Gennadiy says, we did make some initial contacts with, I guess, more on the news side of things related to the unveiling of it. We didn't get any particular response, did we? No.
Well, it's published in several magazines. Alan Waters, you published in, what's it called in this magazine?
A very exciting municipal journal. So, well known in the government. So,
Yeah.
we asked if we could write a piece, and they were interested, and they did give, and we sent photographs of the mural, so there was the visual as well, and we were able to tell that story. I suppose the other aspect of this is working with schools. We've had some school visits already. The idea is to try and get this place used as an educational space. And actually the structure of the council chamber lends itself to that, plus it's got nice thick green carpets for children to sit on and respond to the piece of work. And it's also an opportunity really to talk about this as the democratic space in the city. Some opportunities and some spin-offs, and so Claire and myself have been giving some thought to that as well. The other thing, of course, is and it's been alluded to, is the multidisciplinary quality of this piece of work. So in a kind of binary curriculum world which says there's a hierarchy of subjects, STEM subjects, science subjects are preeminent, and arts subjects are optional. The fact that this combines all of those different elements, so it's good for history. I mean, it's reshaping the way history is written. So when I was at university in the 1970s, there was social, there was economic, there was political, there was a vague allusion to, there was a French Revolution, and that was to do with some poor harvests prior to 1789. But now history is being written as climate and climate change is the driver. And I think what's instructive about this piece of work is that we have in the foreground, represented by Haysborough and so on, is the impact of climate change, and you see in a way how relatively insignificant human activity and human landmarks are in that sort of context. So it reshapes history, it reshapes geography, it's science, it's biology, it's politics. And so I think ultimately the ambition is to try and pull together some framework materials for schools to enable them to use that, but also to make a very emphatic point about interdisciplinary education, which gives you that 360-degree view of our situation and how we engage with it, rather than the sort of binary, rather one-dimensional views of a hierarchy of subjects that determine, where students will make choices and narrowing choices rather than opening them up. So there's a potential for that as well.
Would you like to follow me to the corridor or show you?
You just hang on. Just a bit straight one point, we hope that information which we produce for teachers, as Alan mentioned, will be very helpful in helping fill the blank canvas or blank canvases, which is from present to 2200. Because imagining the future or representing preferences, needing the imagination which is required to rise to the challenge of climate change, should not be left just to scientists and politicians. It's too demanding. So we want ideas. We want people to visualise what their ideas of the future of Norwich and Norfolk and indeed the world might be, by producing a number of versions of this last period of the mural through elements, paintings, and we hope that schools might find that a particularly attractive prospect.
What's good about it as well is that it's very rich information, but it's not prescriptive, so that as a school's resource, you can pull lots of things out of it. And I think very importantly, because we're talking about young people engaging with it, the message that you've got in the end panel that combines the elements of human choice, which is very important as part of the education for our future generation, but also hope, because without hope, only despair exists, and that's just stymies you so much. So it's really good that you've got that sort of the two rings there with the hope and the, it's sort of yin and yang, if you like, of the hope and the catastrophe that we face if we don't act. So well done.
I also think as an extension that the notion of being able to respond and reflect, so not necessarily solve or document the problems that we have laid out for the future generations, but we are seeing through our organisation more and more young people acknowledge a climate anxiety. Anxiety that is coming and is manifesting in a real way for them because of the problems that we have created for them. And having that blank canvas at the end to allow them to voice that concern is a really powerful message as we give young people agency and voice, because they will have to change the future that we will live in, because we won't be working in it at that point in time, and we are passing it on to them. And that blank space for them to reflect those things, I think, is a really powerful vehicle to do that. And I think the less prescriptive we are in that as leaders within our communities, within our spaces, within our fields, the better, because it's their pen, it's their choice, and it's their future.
There used to be a very scary map in the greenhouse when you went in the door on the right at the bottom of the stairs, showing what was going to happen to Norwich and Norfolk. And I can't remember the time span, but it was scary. Not necessarily the sort of thing you want to show children, but another way of demonstrating what will happen specifically here. I think obviously Norfolk was going first, and then it was Norwich.
Greenhouse, would you mean?
Yeah, the cafe.
I've seen
I
it.
don't know if it's still on the wall. It was years ago.
Sea level rises.
Yeah, sea level. And we're going to disappear if we don't do something about it. I'm not happy.
Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
So would you like to see the